Hey there, fish keepers, Dean here. I've been getting a lot of requests lately about how I take care of my plants in my aquariums. So I decided to make a little video on all of my tanks and what I'm trying to achieve in each aquarium in regards to the plants. So I'm going to go through every tank that I have and describe the plants that are in it, and try to ignore the fish as much as I can and just really focus on the plants. So for starters, I'll just go over my general routine maintenance on the aquariums. So I don't use any CO2. I have a list of my water parameters below, so really average tap water that we have here in Red Deer. pH is 7.8 and the hardness is about 250 milligrams of calcium carbonate, and my room is heated to about between 68 and 72 degrees. On a number of aquariums I have heaters in them just for specific species, so I think I have 6 or 8 heaters across the fish room, and they're more to keep at about 78 to 80 just for particular species or for breeding. And I keep most of my aquariums under the same water change routine. Actually, all of my aquariums under the same water change routine. I change about 25 to 50% once a week, and just a couple of the tanks get 50% water changes, those that have a lot of fry in them. So if we look at my general tank, they're mostly low tech under fairly low light. On this particular tank here, I've had it since 2005. And it's been set up since then, so about 20 years for this aquarium, same substrate. But the plants have changed quite a bit over that time. I used to do a lot of dirted tanks, and I did that for about 10 years. So I've kept aquariums since the early 80s, and I've kept planted aquariums since about the late 80s. And I've kept all kinds of different plants, and I've figured out those which survive and thrive and those that just melt over those years. And these are basically the plants that have done well for me over the past 30 some odd years. And you'll see that there's a lot of Anubias in my tanks because I tend to use low light. And they do really well under low light, but moderate light you can grow different species as well. So this particular tank here has got an AquaClear 70 on it, so good flow. Most of my tanks all have good flow with either internal power filters or external canisters or power filters. This particular tank here has got, you can see a lot of Anubias barteria in the back. On the left hand side we've got Hygrophila polysperma, and so the Anubias is slow growing, so you can have lots of it, and the Hygrophila polysperma is super fast growing, so it's good to have a slow growing plant and a fast growing plant if you have a fair bit of nutrients in your tank. You can see on the right hand side, so there's some Limnophilia sessiflora, and I've just been trying out this plant in this tank. It doesn't do super well. The light's too low for it in this tank, but I just needed a place to put this in the short term while I'm setting up another tank. You can see there's some Vesuvius sword towards the middle there. It's been barely living in this tank, not quite enough light for it. There's a little bit there on the left that's been in there longer. It's a bit darker green. It's not, I wouldn't call it thriving in this particular tank. It's got a pretty old LED on it. There's a bit of Crypt lutea in here and Crypt wenti that's mixed in there in the foreground. And so this tank is basically a holding tank. It holds a lot of my South American tetras and it also has bleeding hearts. I was going to put my Endler colony in here, and I had bleeding hearts you can see in that cave right in the middle that were intended to as population control, but they ate the males. So the bleeding heart tetras, full-grown male Endler guppy, they eat them. So that did not work out well at all. So this tank is set up for that, but now I just kind of use it as an extra holding tank. There's not a lot of other plants that are in here. There's a little bit of Crypt parva in the bottom there, but it's set up as a cave. And I've also got my CW155s in here, and they are basically nocturnal, so they appreciate a lot of dark spots to hide. So this tank and is ultra easy to maintain. I change about 1/3 of the water on it, and never any hair algae, blackbeard algae, hardly any green spot algae problems in it at all. It's very dense with Anubias, so that's taking up most of the nutrients, and then any kind of nutrient spikes are taken up by the Hygger, and it is incredibly stable. Oh yeah, I forgot that there is also Cryptocorn Asteriana in here. There's some great big plants at the back. That is an indestructible Cryptocorn. Probably one of the fastest growing species in the hobby. And it's just, I got it right in the back, like completely abused, hardly any light, and it just grows. So just an excellent plant for hardiness. And out of these species, I would say the Anubias, the Hygger, the Asteriana, Cryptlutea, Cryptwentai are all super simple plants that over the years I haven't been able to kill them. They're just tough. They do really well in our water parameters. The Vesuvius star, it's a little bit more particular, needs more light, but it is alive in this tank, but not really thriving. So we'll move on to my next tank. So this tank here holds my Pseudomugil gertrudes and some Corydorus panda. It's mostly Anubias. On the right hand side there, we got some Cryptocorn crispatula balance on the right and on the left. So that was actually the first plant that I did really well with when I first started keeping aquarium plants, was the balance, we'll call it. And very tough, does really well in most water parameters. I've kept it in large tanks where it can grow really big, and I've kept it in tiny tanks where it gets dwarfed and eventually takes over. So it's an incredibly tough plant. The only problem with it is it can melt when you change water parameters on it, so you got to be careful of that. If it melts down to nothing, and I've had this plant, it could be the original group with a few additions. I've had it since like 1988, 89. So that's, well over 30 years of runners. So I haven't had it flower before. So you can see it there. It's the tall, thin plant with the crinkly leaves on the right. And on the left, that particular one I got from Tina from our Aquarium Club. It is from Dave Howarth, who's one of my first friends at the Calgary Aquarium Society. And I've got his plant. He's since passed, so this is like a memorial to him. I'm going to switch out all the balance to just that little strain of Crypt balance on the left hand side there. I've also got some Bacopa carolinea on here, and this tank, it's just the Bacopa is just intended to cover up the background a bit there. This tank is really intended as just a breeding tank for these Pseudomugil, gertrudeas. Nothing really special going on here, so it's kind of like a junglescape, we'll call it. And it's got a heater in it, so this tank is pretty stable. It gets more hair algae than some of my other tanks, but the lights on it are terrible. It's got these Aqueon lights that come with this kit tank. This is like and you see those? They're not very good lights, especially in a tall tank like this. So the problem with it is there's not very much light on the upper left and upper right corners. So the plants just don't grow very well there. So it is one tank that I have to take a bit of algae out of. The previous one, like, I do nothing for taking algae out of. So we'll move on to the next one here. This is my pea puffer tank, and these are pea puffers that are raised from eggs. In this tank we've got lots of Anubias, lots of Cryptbolance. You see that's a bit of a theme in my fish room. You can see the pea puffers there, some Limnophilia sessiflora on the left hand side there. Really great plant. This tank really suffers from hair algae. I probably spend 5 or 10 minutes, which is quite a bit of time, considering I have 30 tanks, just pulling hair algae out of this tank, because the pea puffers, as you can see on the bottom here, the snail graveyard, kill all the snails, which kind of upsets the balance a bit in the tanks, so you get lots of algae. There's shrimp in here. They seem to leave the shrimp alone, but they destroy snails. There is a tiger lotus in here. It's a bit dwarfed, really too big of a plant for these 13-gallon aquariums, but it does well. It doesn't need a lot of light. It gives a bit of red. It's been in there since it was tiny. I moved it over there when it was just a teeny tiny little plant, and it is a plant that needs a little bit of fertilization or benefits from it, so just a root tab under there. So most of my tanks, as far as fertilization goes, it's just fish poo, right? So the vast majority of the tanks here don't have any root tabs, don't have any additives to it, but for the tiger lotus, occasionally I'll add a root tab in with them, and they benefit from that. If you put them in a tank without any kind of nutrient in the substrate, they won't do well. They're a heavier root feeder, so I never put them into like a brand new setup. I will put them into aged tanks, or if it is a newer setup, I'll put a root tab with them, because they just won't make it. But this Limnophilia sessiflora, I think, has been turning the corner on this tank. As far as algae accumulation, there's hardly any in it now. I think I got it under control. It just grows so fast and takes up so much nutrients. I think that it outcompetes the hair algae. There's also a little bit of duckweed in most of my tanks. I take it out every week, and that's just good. It's good backup in case you get like an ammonia spike. If you start seeing the duckweed growing a lot faster, you're probably getting too many nutrients in your tank, too many fish. So, fish keeping is about adjusting. So if you have something that can tell you, it's like the canary in the coal mine, you can adjust a bit. So change the water more, maybe don't have as many fish. So the next tank here, this was the first tank that I tried hairgrass in, giant hairgrass, and it did really well. So these taller 13-gallon aquariums, it's a taller plant, and it does super well in it. So you can see the hairgrass there in the back. It's got some Cryptbolance. It's got a little bit of mini val in it, which is doing okay. And of course, another tiger lotus that is kind of dwarf, so you have to spend a lot of time trimming it back to keep it in a smaller tank like this. It's a giant plant. So it doesn't really you don't really see it in all its glory in these smaller tanks, but it's good for having extra tiger lotus around. If we look in a little bit closer here, you can see there's lots of crypt parva in here on the bottom there with the kind of rounder leaves, the little guys, and some Hemianthus quadricustatus you'll see in the middle there. I've had a lot of that over the years, and it's a really hardy type of plant. It does a bit better in an established tank. You can see it right in the middle there, but it's suffering right now because it's not getting as much light. So this tank needs to be dialed back a bit, and it was originally intended as a grow out for my fish, but it's incredibly difficult to catch fish out of, so I'm just using it as a holding tank right now for my rummy nose rasboras. So this particular plant here, though, Hemianthus quadricustatus, can get about 6 or 8 inches, and it reproduces by runners. It can go really great, but it does need enough light to do well. So you have to have good openings for light. On this tank here is a different type of light. It's just got an internal filter on it, and it's got a current satellite. It's got just like a white LED with blues on it too. It's not like a high-end light, it's a cheap light. So I would call this like moderate light, not really low light like was on the corner tank or those previous 2 tanks. In this tank here, I've got some Medaka, and it is holding my female Asian rummy noses, and this tank here is like end game tank of Anubias. So it's just completely Anubias. There is actually, I don't know if you can see it here, we'll go in close, a little bit of Suswassertang on the bottom here. You can see it kind of at the underneath everything, but Suswassertang can live in the dark. So this tank, incredibly stable, 0 hair algae, almost no algae at all on the tank. All my tanks have a bit of snails in them, so the snails are cleaning it up. There's shrimp in here. This is about as low maintenance as you can get for an aquarium. It's just an Anubias storm in there, and it looks pretty decent. It's kind of a different setup to the other tanks. It's like a big giant cave. It's all wood in there. You can see there's a little bit of Suswassertang growing in the dark, basically, but creates a bit of a cave there. The Asian rummy noses are pretty shy fish, so they like to have lots of hiding spots. We'll move on to the next. Same sort of a setup, except that this one here has got a few different varieties of plants. So in this tank here, we've got the hairgrass, which I started growing in the back there. It's got a lot more flow in it, so it's got a different internal filter. I think it's like a Fluval A3 or something like that. And so it's got a bit more flow. And this tank is growing out some of my black prince gudaeads, or Cracodon audax. And it's got a few different plants in it. You can see in here, it used to have a big algae problem in it. So you can see the Anubias on here has got like some algae damage, but it's getting under control. And the reason it's getting under control is I've got some Hygrophila compact in there, which is a pretty fast growing plant. You can see that's right up in here. This is Hygrophila compact. It grows fairly quickly and pretty densely, and you see this is the first time we see my Ludwigia Rubens in here, and it is a nice red plant. It only does really well close to the light, so it'll take up a fair bit of nutrients, but boy, you shade it and it will not do well at all. can see one of the plants in here with the crinkly leaves. This is cryptocorn right in the middle. Cryptocorn, it was sold to me as Griffithii. I don't know. It doesn't, you know, it doesn't look like any of the typical crypts that are out there, so it's hard to say exactly what it is. There's some Seswassertang in the dark there, in the hairgrass, some Lutea, and a little bit of Crypt Parva along the bottom, but this tank here has been a lot more difficult to deal with the algae in it than other tanks. It has just had a lot of fish in it that have been being fed super heavily. The duckweed doesn't grow in this tank because the current is a little bit too much for it, so you haven't got that backup nutrient sink. And hygropoly looks terrible in it, so I've been experimenting with different plants to get this tank to be a bit more stable, but we're getting there. The Hygrophila compact has really helped with that quite a bit, and it's doing pretty good. And it's also one tank that I tried a deep substrate on. Yeah, it's like 3 or 4 inches deep. I don't move it around. Have I noticed a real difference from my other tanks? Not really. It's, pretty much the same as the other ones. So we'll move on to this little tank here, which I'm growing out my baby Asian rummy noses. This is just a kit tank. It's a Marina 5-gallon, and it's been ultra stable. I've had my orange shrimp going in this one. This is my orange shrimp mothership, and the plants do okay. And it's got one of those crappy lights on it, just like a little LED, and but it seems to actually grow plants fairly decently. You can see that the only way that you could set up this tank is as an island, because there's the upper left and upper right are basically dark. So it is conducive to an island setup. So in this tank on the left there, you can see some Crypt Wentai. In the back, there's a bit of Anubias. In the back right, there's a Cryptocorn Asteriana, which is like gigantic for this tank. So it's not going to reach full size, that's for sure. In the front around everything is Schismatoglottis pretoi, which is an awesome little plant. It looks similar to Anubias, but you have to plant it in the substrate, or it just will slowly die. It's not very fast growing. It's like, its claim to fame is that it's faster growing than Anubias, but it's not much faster growing. So it's taken a fair while to acquire this much growth on it, but it is faster growing than Anubias, but not much. It's a nice little foreground plant, super easy. I've had really no problems with it. It can almost be kept in the dark, but it doesn't do well unless it's rooted. So you've got to make sure that it is in the substrate. And I don't think it would require that fertile of a substrate either. I've put it into a new setup with hardly any nutrients available to it, and it's done well, probably because it grows so slowly. But we'll move on to my next one. So that's a bit of a grow out tank, that little tank there. And it used to be a shrimp tank. Might as well do this on the way over here. So this is my 75-gallon, where I call it the Garryi tank, so where I keep Corridor's Garryi. It's got a lot of different plants in it. In the back, it's very much a jungle. So there's Cryptasteriana, Crypt Balance, Crypt Lutea, you can see in the middle there, and then giant hairgrass. And then we've got some Laganandra there. I think it's a Laganandra green. I don't know exactly what species that is in the middle there. We've got some Cryptocorn neuri, Rose Maiden, which is just a gorgeous plant. You can see on the bottom there, it's the kind of the tiger stripe stuff. Lagonandra maboldi, which is an incredibly beautiful plant. This is, I would call this moderate light. I have a Hygger 24/7 fixture on it. It's not super bright, but it's enough to do a few different types of plants. And the Lagonandra maboldi is a beautiful plant. It's got some nice pink leaves in there. It's bigger leaves, so you have to scape it conducive to it being a larger plant. It's kind of a mid-ground. And then I've got a big glob of Anubias in the middle of here that I turned into an island. And Anubias, it'll basically contain it to grow whichever way you want. So there's a lot of options with it for fish keeping. And this tank has got a bit of root tabs in it. There's a lot of more difficult plants that are in this tank, so I've given, and it's because it's more so that I've been nervous about them, so I've added root tabs to that Cryptocorn neuri. This little kind of a patch of grassy stuff here is Cryptocorn nivea. It does awesome under moderate light and low light. I've got it under in a couple of different tanks. Not really low light. I would call this a moderate light plant. Doesn't need a ton of nutrients, but it will benefit from root tabs. I've got some Cryptocorn Silver Queen here, which is kind of these flattened out looking crypts. It actually does better under medium light. There's a nicer one in the back there, but it hasn't been doing great. It's surviving, but not really thriving. It sends out new runners, it's reproduced, but it hasn't really taken over. It hasn't done nearly as well as the Rose Maiden. So you can see but it's got really cool leaves. The Silver Queen, you can see it's kind of a pinky, on the bottom right there, kind of a pinky green with a bit of striping in it. It's a really neat looking plant, but it hasn't really thrived as much as the Rose Maiden has. So go to the other side of this tank. And scare the Gary eye to a different position. You can see the Rose Maiden's really doing well here. It does good with a little bit of shading. So if you put it out into the middle, it just gets really flat and hugs the sand on the bottom. And this tank, it's got about 2 inches of just straight sand in it, the odd root tab. It's got a canister filter on it, Eheim 20-14, I think. You can see some more Lagonandra maboldi here, but it's a little bit shaded. That's a plant that needs light. This guy right here in the middle is Piptospatha. Really cool plant, but I haven't been able to propagate it at all. It's got mottled leaves, just a different leaf structure. So it's one of the plants that's surviving. I wouldn't call it thriving. Like the individual plant itself is doing well, but it's not really reproducing. And then we've got some of this Vesuvius sword in here. This is thriving in this tank under moderate light. So all my plantlets have come from this guy here in the middle. And some more of the Ludwigia here. It's kind of green and red depending on the light that's on it. So more light, it will turn more red. Got some Hygropolia here. We've got a bit of Cryptopsis Pondaterafolia in the dark here, just about. I should probably get those out into the light so I get more of them. And then you can see here, I've got extra flow on this tank. So I've got the Eheim, I think it's 2214, and then I've got a little Aquael pump on this one with a sponge on it. And it just increases flow. If you don't have good flow in your tanks with plants, they just can get like dead spots. They don't get nutrients. It makes a really big difference, I think, having a bit of flow. That's why all my tanks are on either hang on the backs, internal canisters, or internal filters or canisters. You can see the shrimp are doing really well in this tank as well. So we'll move on from this one. It's been super stable. I get a bit of hair algae in this tank, but not much. There's a lot of fish in this tank. It's used as my red neon grow out, and panda cory grow out. There's a bunch of panda cories in here, but they're all hiding in the back. So we'll go down to here. This is another tank with a Hygger 24/7 light on it. It's an RGB as well. It's got some in the back. You can see it's got some dwarf val, some Lobelia cardinalis, which hasn't done insanely well, but it's growing. You can see it in the bottom right there. More of the Lobelia in the back there on the upper left and upper right. We got some Vesuvius sword in the middle there a little bit. We got some little Anubias that are kind of making like a mid-ground, which has turned out really cool. I take baby Anubias plants, put them onto rocks, and then grow them out like that, and it's actually made for a kind of a neat mid-ground. You can see I've moved in some of the Rose Maiden. We're trying out, I'm always experimenting with what will grow where, so I've got some of that Nevea from the tank above in here. There's the remnants of a sword which was shaded out. You can see kind of in the middle left there. We've got some Crypt Parva, but lots of Lutea in this tank. Cryptocorn lutea, you can see it there on the left. A few Asterianas, and you can see right in the middle is Barclaya longfolia red. And that Barclaya longfolia red gets to be a really big plant, but it dies back once every year and then returns the next year. It goes to seed, so I've got all kinds of seeds from it. It's probably the most beautiful aquarium plant that I've ever kept, but it does die back every year. And I think that's all the different plants that are in this one. So it's got like a Aquaclear 50 on it, and then another internal pump in there to add flow. So it's not, I think that you could get away like on a this is a 40 breeder. I think you could get away with a Aquaclear 70 on it, just that, but with the 50 it just is not enough. I need more flow for these to keep the plants going. This tank used to be a hair algae disaster, but since I've taken, so there's a lot of rocks that I had in here and it just grew hair algae like crazy. So since I've taken them out, it's just hasn't, given the hair algae a substrate to grow on. And the plant density is greater. There's a little bit of duckweed in here, but not too much. I take it out, a little bit out every week. It seems to keep the tank stable, and it's just another straight sand aquarium. There is just one root tab underneath that Barclaya longfolia in the middle, so no root tabs on anything else. It's just fish waste, which is keeping this going. It gets like about 25 to 30% water change every week. So this guy here is my memorial tank to Melissa. I'll try and go from the side a bit here because there's just a nasty reflection off of the one light. There's just a ton of endlers in here, and this is kind of my hornwort mothership. There's a lot of hornwort in this tank, which is really a pretty plant, and it gets red at the tips and looks pretty good, but it'll eventually come loose from where I've planted it in there and float all over the tank, give the baby guppies a place to grow. This one's got some gravel in it, and snails. Gets a 25% water change every week. This is a Fluval Spec 5. We've got a little bit of Anubias in the back there, and a bit of Hydrocotyle moneri, I think. So pennywort in there, but it gets big. It's not one of my favorite plants. It gets too big for anything. Then this tank here, we've got another grow out. This is for CPDs. I just took them from my continuous breeding setup. I've got some Hydrocotyle tripardita in there. It's got a bit of hair algae. I just did battle with hair algae in this tank. It's just straight sand. There's no root tabs in here. We got a little bit of parva growing here, and some Limnophilia sessiflora, some Rotella rotundifolia on the left there, which is actually a way better plant for this tank, but it overgrew, got lots of hair algae in it. It was difficult to deal with because it was a grow out tank. I was feeding it pretty heavy. So I knocked it back, and I'm going to see how the Limnophilia sessiflora does for grow-outs. It is a bit faster grower than the Rotella, and not nearly as compact of growth. So I'm thinking that the hair algae is not going to get in it as bad. And but this tank has been really stable. It's one of my grow-outs, and the one thing that's really cool in this is I've got a bit of an Anubias wall on the back here, which kind of covers the equipment. So that's another Fluval Spec 5, and then we've got a Fluval Spec 5 here. Got a Hygger light that I tried out on it because all the spec lights have burnt out. Terrible. We got Chrynicthes bailey in here. I just moved him in here the other day. This is basically my Seswassertang mothership. So Seswassertang has been doing really well in this tank, and I use it to seed Seswassertang in all my other tanks, but it's mostly like a jungle with Anubias and Seswassertang. So the Seswassertang does really well. You can see, like in the dark there, that's all Seswassertang. It's just thick, but you can't see it because the light is not good enough to show it off. But that's okay, because Seswassertang grows in the dark. This one here is kind of my showscape with the hairgrass carpet. The carpet did really well. It gets some hair algae. You just have to pick it out. It just takes a little bit of work. But this tank is really overgrown. It used to be a Cryptocorn parva tank, but once the factory light burnt out with the Fluval Spec, I had to switch it up. This is just a $20 LED that I got from Walmart. I ordered it in. It's made in China, but man, is it bright. It actually grows plants really well. A little bit too well. We got the Ludwigia in there, and lots of Lutea. There's some Crypt parva in here, but it's too bright for Crypt parva. It just doesn't do too well. So this tank changed over quite a bit. So I will have to reset it at some point here, but this is my hairgrass carpet. No CO2. It's just straight sand in there. I've put the odd root tab in it to grow that hairgrass a little bit, but it's been doing pretty fine on its own, just on fish waste. And this one probably gets about a 50% water change every week, just because it's just growing like crazy, and The guppies are eating pretty good in there. So we'll move on to another tank, which is just straight Anubias. This tank here I'm using to grow up black prince goodads. There's like, this is a zero maintenance aquarium. Like, I just change the water, maybe squeeze out the filter, but with that much Anubias in there, like, it is incredibly stable. I've never seen any hair algae in this tank at all. It is doing great. It's just got an Aqueon hang on the back of it, a National Geographic LED, so not a, a very strong LED. I would call it a low light, and it's got a little bit of Cryptlutea on the back right, but it's almost all Anubias. So it's kind of an end game tank, super stable, great for raising fry. Don't have to do anything with it. This tank here is actually my quarantine tank. It's got a bit of Seswassertang in it, a bit of Anubias, but nothing special going on. It's a quarantine tank. It's got a bunch of shrimp in there, and it's not really scaped at all. It's just got some things thrown in it so that the new fish can benefit from having a little bit of plants with them. But you don't see much hair algae in this tank either, but it's got like terrible lights on it as well. So it's got a little bit of light, but enough to grow Anubias and Seswassertang. Lots of hiding spots so that new fish can hide out and feel comfortable. So nothing really much going on in that tank. It's got one pencilfish in it right now. This tank here is my plant surplus aquarium. So you can see there's lots of Hygger polysperma on the left hand side. Crypt, you can see that wavy on the left, the wavy, that's the Crypt griffithii, I think. I don't know, it could be a different species. If you know, let me know. There's a few mixed crypts in here. There's actually some Schismata glottis in the back there. Oh, you can see my little CW111s. There's some Schismata glottis right in the middle there in the dark. There is a Madagascar lace plant in the middle there, but you would really never know it. It's really hasn't done well. It's done okay, but I would not call it thriving. We've got some Java moss in the back here. It's actually spiky moss, so I've got all kinds of things breeding in here, CPDs and red neon blue eyes and my blue shrimp. So that spiky moss has done really well. I just keep it at the back. It grows long and tall. It's kind of a different plant for growing, or a different kind of a moss. It really wants to reach for whatever light is there. It doesn't really look super good when you tie it onto wood or anything like that. It just kind of goes straight up. But it's good for, you know, breeding shrimp. Lots of Cryptlutea in here. You can see the big balances that are in the back, so they provide a lot of shade there. There's a fair bit of duckweed in this tank. It is a grow out tank primarily, so I keep a bit of duckweed in there, take a bit out every day, or not every day, but once a week. And this part, you can see that crypts will literally grow in the dark. There's just this tank is set up to keep it dark, so there's a big root wad in here, and my Cordurus garryi live underneath there, and on the top I've put Anubias, and it's basically a carpet of Anubias on the top there close to the light, and makes a good hiding spot for the Cordurus garryi in the back there, underneath there. I don't think that there's any other different plants that are in here. There's a bit of Cryptocornus steriana in the back there, but it's kind of a mixture of everything because it's like the overflow tank for plants. but it's doing super well. There's a little bit of hair algae that grows in this tank, but hardly any. It gets about a third water change. It's got an Eheim canister filter on it as well. It's got fairly decent circulation in it, so it's a tank that does really well. Super bulletproof. It's where I put my CW111s, those little guys right there on the bottom left. Incredibly stable, high value fish. This tank is unheated, so 68 to 72 degrees in the winter. It might get up to close to 80 in the summer, but you don't want to mess around with a heater with valuable fish if you can avoid it. And then we've got a little experiment here. So we've got the Ludwigia, we've got some tiger lotus, we've got some crypts, and we're kind of going for a reddy orange type aquarium. You can see I've got the hairgrass in the back, I've got some Balancea in the back there. This is a grow out tank for Medaka, and it's doing well. So I you know, it's got lots of fast growing Ludwigia in there, so it's keeping it red. It's just a straight sand substrate, no root tabs in it. It's got a bit of Lutea, a bit of Balancea, a bit of Asteriana, and this is just, I don't know, I think of this tank as like fall colors. It's kind of neat. I like it, it's different. I try to make all my tanks different, each one of them. This one here, we've got the rice fish that Hans gave me, the Sigoides. Super cool. I love those guys. But in this tank, we've got something different going on. Just a Val, dwarf Val background, and we've got some of the Nevea. So that other tank with the Garryi is about 76 degrees. This one is room temperature, so about 70. And that Nevea seems to do well in it too. So I'm just trying it out in here, and we got a little bit of Schismata glottis protoi on the left at room temperature too, so it does good. But in that corner tank is also room temperature. Just an internal filter on this tank, and we got some shrimp in there. It's doing well. So this one, I set it up about 2 months ago. It had a few root tabs in the back for the valves to grow, and about, I don't know, 2 inches or so of Stony River black sand, which is my favorite stuff. It's very lightweight and doesn't compact really bad. And we've got here, we got some of those Sigoide fry, some red neon blue eyes in here, and this tank has probably got the worst light that I've got in the fish room on it. It's like this master class LED. It's really bad for light intensity, but for whatever reason Crypt Parva likes it, and it's about the right light intensity for Sesquitertang. This tank had a ton of hair algae in it, and I just got after it. So you just got to get after the hair algae if you want to get rid of it. And I never really introduced a fast growing plant into this tank. I just picked out the hair algae, and eventually your slow growing plants like Sesquitertang and Parva, Cryptwentai, which is in the upper left there, will take over, but you just have to take out the hair algae manually once you reach critical mass where the plants are taking up more nutrient than and not leaving any extra for your hair algae to grow in. It's just got a little internal canister on it. So it's kind of a different scape to a lot of my other tanks. I like it. It's cool. It's for growing shrimp. This tank here has got my Tiger Limia, and it is one of those tanks that you set up, and it was working great for a Pseudomugil fregatus breeding tank. And so if it ain't broke, don't fix it, because I was just picking fry out of the upper left hand corner. So it's got, you can see the Anubias on the left there, and then we've got the Cryptocorn Griffithii maybe some Lutea on the right, and not much else in it. So it was set up as a breeding tank. This is one of the tanks that I've got some gravel in, and I just vacuum the front of this gravel, like when I'm doing the water change once a week, a little bit. Like it, the gravel can go a little bit sour on you if you don't vacuum it a little. Like I would say for my gravel tanks, every 3 or 4 years I do a thorough gravel vac and take out a lot of the nutrients and then replant all the plants in it. Some tanks I have to do quicker than others. This guy here is one of those Anubias tanks where the Anubias has taken over. You basically get zero hair algae in it. The gravel that's in this tank is from the 70s. It's from the first tank that I was given, or tropical tank that I was given when I was about 10 or 11. And the brown gravel that's in there, it's mixed with sand now because there's not much of it left. Started out in a 20-gallon Metaframe tank. And this tank here has been set up since 98 with the same substrate. You can see this stuff here is actually petrified wood. And I'd like to rescape it, but I've got like some long-term residents in here. There's some chili rasboras in here that are, you know, close to 5 years old. So I really don't want to upset their system here. Let them live out their lives. And there's a number of different tetras in here, rosy loaches. This tank here has just got a little Aqueon hang on the back, a Aqueon LED. It doesn't have the very strong light, but good enough for Anubias. You can see there's a little bit of Schismata glottis in the center there, a little bit of Cryptocorn wenti, a little bit of Lutea, but it's mostly an Anubias tank. And I knocked it back here pretty good, and I'm getting a little bit of diatom going on it, but nothing much. The shrimp are taking care of it. Shrimp are doing great in here. So this has been a ridiculously stable aquarium for 20 years. Like it's, well, more than that, like 30 some years. Just change the water on it once a week and don't do anything else. You don't have to worry about basically any kind of maintenance with it. Change the water, feed the fish, clean the filter. It's like a 10-minute a week type aquarium. The kind that I like, because if you have a lot of aquariums, you don't want to spend a ton of time on maintenance. This is my 75-gallon that I use for my goldfish from the pond. They come in here for the winter, and this has got a ton of Cryptocorn crispatula balance in it. It's got a bunch of tiger lotus. It's got a bunch of lutea in the bottom. And I have to change the water on this tank pretty religiously. I probably change about 50% a week, but that's because I've got goldfish in here. And goldfish, they can be kept with plants, but boy, you got to do a lot of water changes. In the summertime, I use this aquarium. It's got about maybe 2.5 inches of black sand in it. I knock back the balance quite a bit, and I add all my other types of plants in it. So I'll put a lot of that Hemianthus quadricostatus in the front of here and grow up a bunch of that, and anything else that I'm having a bit of trouble with. It's an unheated tank. It's got a canister filter on it, really good flow. Definitely no fertilization in this. When the goldfish come out of here, whatever shrimp I'm having trouble with, I put in this tank, usually the green jades because they just don't breed enough. I throw them in there and then they grow out in the summer. And I grow lots of different plants. I knock back the balance quite a bit. But towards the end of the winter, I'll often get a bunch of hair algae in here, but it's just because the nutrient load in this tank is just monumental. So eventually by the end of the winter, The nutrients are getting ahead of me, but that's goldfish for you. Then this tank here is my CPD continuous breeding setup. And I recently, just the other day, cleared it out quite a bit, took out all the babies, put them into one of the 5 gallons there. It's mostly Cryptlutea in the back. We've got lots of Seswastertang in there. We've got a few Bucephalandra, some wavy green. I think that's purple blue in the upper left there, a bit of wavy green above that one, and I think there's Bucephalandra Katharina. I don't know, that one on the kind of the middle right there. It got shaded pretty good though, so it's just kind of coming back. Crypt Parva on the bottom here, and this tank I originally set up with some root tabs in the back. Quite a few root tabs, and the Lutea went absolutely crazy. It's been set up for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years and growing out tons of CPD. It's been incredibly stable. This tank though has had a lot of hair algae in it. I have to pick it out of there. The hair algae seems to win with the Seswastertang, and I've got to like take out parts of the Seswastertang because it gets too much hair algae in it. But there's a lot going on in it, a lot of feeding. You can see a lot of these CPDs are ancient. So I am going over the next couple of days to replace some of these guys with my younger stock. And yeah, so it's got a hang on the back Aquaclear, a cheaper, I think, Aqueon light on this tank. It doesn't have a really strong light at all on it, but doing really well. And this is Est's Stony River sand, and it's about maybe 1.5 inches, 2 inches of sand, just straight sand on it. It hasn't had root tabs in it for like 3-4 years, so it's just going on fish poop, but there's a lot of fish in there. And then this tank here houses my Apistogramma panduro, and it's got 3 females. This is one of those endgame Anubias tanks. It's got just a ton of Anubias in it, a little bit of crypt, incredibly stable, great for housing or growing out fish. Do a water change on it, and it's got an Aquaclear 20 or mini now, I think they call them, hang on the back on it. You know, 1.5 to 2 inches of black sand. Really a bulletproof, low maintenance, low tech kind of aquarium where you can keep fish, breed them, and it looks good if you like jungly scapes, which I do. They look all right. And then this tank here, I forgot to turn the light on, is an experiment. I decided to try and put together a wholly or purely giant hairgrass scape, and it's just cycling right now, so there's lots of algae on the front of the tank. But I'm gonna try and do this for growing out CPDs, because I grow them out in that 75 where the Garryi are, this one over here, and it's just impossible to catch CPDs out of there. Like when I first go to catch the big group, it's easy because they'll think I'm feeding them, but later on they get wise to that. So I'm gonna try and grow out more of my CPDs in here. And this one here, I'm going to have this giant hairgrass. It's about 2 inches of sand. There was a few root tabs in here when I started it up, all along the back. And then I'm going to put a big clump of that Limnophilia sessiflora in the back left corner. And that'll be my nutrient sink in this tank. But until that point, I'm probably going to throw some shrimp in here. They love this diatom algae that grows on the glass, and it'll be awesome. So excited to see how that one works out. So we'll go into the other room here and check out my 90. It's got some different plants in it. So this is basically my biggest tiger lotus in here, and even in a 90, that plant is really too big if you let it get full size, so I can't have any lily pads going on it. You can see the Cryptocorn asteriana going like crazy on the left, along with some giant val. This tank has got some gravel in it. I would like to change it to sand down the road because it'd be better for my quarries, but yeah, it's doing pretty good. So the one new plant that's in it's got a mixture of Anubias and Java fern on that kind of a sloping ridge that's there, which it's got too much light on it. This has got a Fluval Planted 2.0 on it. And I keep it on full power because I'm growing this stuff at the bottom here. So this is a different kind of Lagonandra, I believe, and it's like a Lagonandra green. It's really neat. It'll get like a spotted pattern, so it's right in the middle there, and it will grow under medium light and a dark. You can see that pattern on this one plant here. It's right in the very middle. It's a kind of a green tiger stripe with a little bit of purple on it. It's kind of a neat plant. So I've been keeping the light high so that grows good. And so this tank here is my retirement tank. It's got a lot of fish in it. It needs to have the water changed religiously, and the filters need to be changed every week. So it's got two Aquaclear 70s on it. You can hear the one is kind of noisy, and I might want to replace that. So this is, it's also got a lot of this Cryptocorn here that was sold to me as Griffithii with the crinkly leaves. If you know what it is, let me know. But that does really well under kind of, it's shaded. A lot of the stuff on the bottom here is shaded, but it's quite a bright light that's on here. I've got a little bit of Cryptocorn Balance in the right hand corner here too, and a lot of the Cryptocorn asteriana in there too. So lots of asteriana. That's a big plant, but probably one of the hardiest plants I've ever kept. So this is, this tank has been doing awesome. It gets a lot of hair algae in it, but I've got some water lettuce in here, and the hair algae will grow on its roots, and I just pluck it off of the roots. So this tank has got lots of nutrients, needs some floaters to take out the nutrients because it's got a lot of fish in it. So I mostly use the floaters to manage my fish waste in this tank. So there is no root tabs in this. This is all run on fish waste. So, but you have to do the water changes on it or it will just crater and be hair algae everywhere. So that's that tank there. And then this is my little experimentation room here. We've got, we'll start with this one here. It's always really hard to film in this room. We've got my Black Prince Gudead tank. So Cracodon audax. It's got the primary colony in here. Lots of val. We've got some Pinto Anubias in here, but I was doing a bit of an experimenting with the lights and I got a hair algae storm. So you can see in one of my tanks, they're not all perfect for being free of hair algae. This one is like ridiculous over the top hair algae on that Pinto. I've got to take one of the lights off of there. I thought that, with the faster growing hygropoly on the left hand side, some tiger lotus and some Ludwigia, that it, plus all the val, like there's just a ton of val in it, that it would be able to handle the nutrients and allow that Anubias Pinto, which needs more light, to be white. Like you can see, it's definitely getting enough light to go white on the leaves, but maybe too much So I haven't quite got that one balanced out yet. So keeping aquariums is always, you know, an experimentation when you're growing plants along with fish, and you know, it's not everything's going to work out perfect. You got to give it some time to dial it in. So I think that taking one of the lights off of here and seeing how that Anubias Pinto does is what I'll do. But it's a newer setup tank. It's only been set up for about 6 or 7 months. So I'm going to try some of that Limnophilia sessiflora in there. Maybe replace the Hygropoly on the left with it, because it seems to grow even faster than Hygropoly. And I have lots of it. So that does well. I've got, like, there's a little like grow light on here, like a T5. And it kind of provides light to all these different tanks. So I've got like I just changed the water on that, but that's Java moss in there. And then I've got a little tank for baby pandas and baby racefish and red neon blue eyes here. You can see my Rotala. I've got most of it going in this tank. I didn't want to get rid of that plant, but it's a tougher plant, Rotala, so you need like moderate light, good flow, and you got to keep on top of the hair algae or it'll grow like crazy on it. And then this is the Limnophilia sessiflora, and then I do lots of this here is kind of interesting. I get a lot of Anubias, and I take like chunks that have gotten shaded out and then just throw them in here, and then they'll grow little plantlets on them, and then I glue them onto a rock and then grow them in tanks. But yeah, so it'll be like this bare rhizome here, and you just throw it in there and it'll grow little plantlets off of it, and you just keep doing that. Just throw it back in after you take the plantlets off until it goes like yellow and nasty. So you get tons of baby Anubias that way, which is pretty cool. And in the experiment room, I've also got some Barclaya longfolia red seeds that you can see there. They're really cool. They've got like little tiny hairs on them. Really neat. And it looks like I got a little bloodworm or something in there. But lots of seeds. I've also planted the seeds in shallow containers here to grow. I've got lots of boosts growing in the air too, and other plants that start out better as a dry start. So you can see in here I do a lot of plant stuff, so things that just start better, dry start. So you see lots of wavy green in there. There's some Hydrocotyl Japan and some Anubias and Boost Ketagang. So they start better as a dry start, so then I put them in my tanks afterwards. I got my cultures, but I will head upstairs and show you my last tank, and you can see what's going on upstairs for another kind of easy tank to take care of. This little tank though, before I send you up there, I change about 50% a week on it. It's a small tank, like it's only, I think it's maybe like 2 gallons, so you gotta just change the water more often. But it grows Limnophilia and Rotala like crazy. Alright, see you upstairs. So this is my aquarium that I keep upstairs for breeding red neon blue eyes. It has mostly Anubias barteri, some Anubias nana, Cryptocorna steriana, some Crypt lutea, and Crypt wenti, but the Crypts are suffering a bit because the Anubias is taking over. It's an incredibly easy tank to take care of. I basically just change the water once a week, 25%, as with the other ones, and maybe gravel vac a bit in the front. Most of my tanks have sand, but this one I keep with gravel. There's some shrimp in here too that keep things in balance, and clean the filter maybe once a month. But I bet you I spend like 10-15 minutes a week on this tank. It's totally full of Anubias, like my other tanks, and this system is completely stable. This is where I get all my red neon blue eyes from. I just throw a spawning mop in here and collect the eggs. And the tank looks beautiful. You can't beat red neon blue eyes for beauty. And this is how I will end my description of plants that thrive and sometimes just survive. Happy fish keeping and enjoy your plants. Take care. Bye.